Yes, welcome, Nicole. This is Global Digest for think tank about geopolitics and international freedom movement and democracy movement and different scholar, businessmen, politician, diplomat, scientists, whoever in the world. We are discussing and sharing our knowledge, and we, supporting each other. So you may know I've been usually talking in my previous discussion in our podcast, different topic, including military coup in Burma and crisis in Ukraine, and financial issue, business issue, and all kind of social ideology issues. South America is part of Asia Pacific region, So Brazil is very big country, and I think Brazil is important country in South America, including in Asia Pacific region, as well as it's member of BRICS. First of all, why don't you share us, is Brazil people ideologically, they are more right-wing ideology, like liberal democracy? I don't know how many population in Brazil are which ideology, and how can you explain us, because people don't know about Brazil.
Well, I'm very happy to be here and to talk to you a little bit about Brazil. Brazil, as you said, is one of the largest countries in the world. Right. We also have the largest part of the Amazon rainforest, which makes us a key piece in climate change, right? So that immediately puts Brazil on the map. We also have a large GDP. So there is money in Brazil, and we have great exports, especially in the area of agronomy. So we export a lot of the world's meat, for example. As far as ideology is concerned, in Brazil, I think you would say that we have a more left-leaning democracy. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at the scale, if you're looking at the far right-wing fascist movement, and if you're looking at the far left communist movement, so right now, our president, Jair Bolsonaro, he's right-leaning. I would consider him
so the government is right-wing government. But
that's right.
In Brazil, as you said, the certain population are in the left-wing ideology.
Yes.
So how come Brazil become left-wing? Because in Asia case, we have Chinese and North Korea, those big communist countries. That's why we are influenced by those countries. In case of Brazil, why how could become left-wing leaning population? Yeah, because
it's a great
is right-wing, liberal democracy in top of Brazil.
It's a great question. When you look at the social services that are offered here in Brazil, for example, we have a strong health system. So everyone can be treated for any disease, any illness, they're treated for free. So I think that when the Brazilian population started receiving these benefits, they were never again going to open their hand and say, no, we don't want, for example, free healthcare. Once a population has those services, they never want to give those services up. So I think that once Brazil had swung to the left, it's very hard to move it back to the right, the population. That doesn't mean that the government doesn't swing to the right, which is the situation right now. But
I see.
historically, when you look at South America, you saw that communist wave that came from China and from Russia. It hit
Right,
South
right.
America at the same time. So we have, for example, Venezuela, Cuba. These are all communist leaning countries, right?
Even right now?
That, yes, yes, Venezuela, absolutely, as well as Cuba. Now, when that movement happened, we saw the United States come down and interfere in South American politics. So, in some ways, that's what kept South America from becoming communist, from becoming completely communist, was interference from the United States. And that's how Brazil finds itself where it is at the moment. The United States helped to install a regime in the 70s and the 80s, a military government. And then in the 90s, we saw a more true democracy that swung as far left as it could until about 2010. And now it's begun to swing a little bit back to the right. I'm hoping we can find some even ground soon. We have new elections in 2022.
The middle ground.
Yes, we have elections coming up soon. Let's hope.
We cannot say it's completely left-wing influence in Brazil because you are still run by right-wing government, you know.
That's exactly right. Right now, we have a right-wing government in power. Absolutely. A government that leans towards fascist. Jair Bolsonaro, his model was Trump, right? The American president, Donald Trump. He looks up to that kind of leadership, which we just saw in France. Fortunately, Marine Le Pen didn't win the election, right?
Right.
But we do see this movement around the world right now, this right-wing fascist movement that thankfully we have people like yourself who are talking about the importance of democracy, and hopefully we can combat this movement, this right-wing fascist movement that seems to want to take hold in our world.
I'm surprised in, I mean, during Cold War, it could be ideology competition, left wing and right wing, because of Russia and very strong socialist society in the world. That time, American and those left wing countries are not that strong. I mean, they are equally positioned at the time, but now at the end of Cold War, post-Cold War, why South America are still, you know, intact with the left-wing ideology? What impact factor in South American country, in Brazil, within domestic, it made left-wing population just for social, you know, social welfare issue? Because I mean, even in America or many left-wing country, democratic country, they call social democratic. I mean, basically they are liberal democracy. Within liberal democracy, they have a social welfare program. They emphasize social welfare program. It can say left-wing, but the basic foundation is liberal democracy. But I don't know in Brazil, it's similar to that kind of situation, or you are, or totally going to jump into the, possible to jump into left-wing country?
No, I would consider it a social democracy, a strong social democracy at that, but it's a young democracy. You know, Brazil has been a democratic country only for the past 35 years, more or less.
Yeah.
So this is a very young democracy, which means that in comparison with the United States, which I also think is at a turning point right now, it doesn't have an older constitution that's been put into practice in crisis.
I see.
Now, when we look at the United States right now, I see a crisis coming. There's problems with the courts, and there's a great divide amongst both populations, the left and the right. Fortunately, the only thing I think that's keeping a country like the United States from civil war is an older democracy that's been tested, and a Bill of Rights that's been tested. We don't have that here in Brazil. They make a lot of changes constantly to the Constitution. So it's not a fixed document that you can count on.
So you mean your Brazilian democratization is still in the process? You are not reach your goal yet. You want to say it's still in the process? It's not yet completely done. The process was not yet done. You want to say like that?
In my opinion, yes. I think that I do believe Brazil and the Brazilian people to be socially democratic. I think that that is the ideology. I think that even when you speak to someone from the right, they still believe in some of the social services, the social welfare programs. They don't want to take those away from the people. So for me, that continues to be a socially democratic
and even many Western countries, European, American, they still keep social welfare program. It's not necessarily mean they are socialist or left-wing ideology. They have to reserve those kind of benefit for the people interest. But in terms of overall ideologically, they are still a liberal democracy. I guess in Brazil, I think you have a regular election, right? And
yes.
Your constitution is fair enough, or any dictatorship system in the country?
No, we have a well-organized government. The elections take place on a regular and fair schedule. The election results can be trusted. We're one of the countries farthest ahead in cybersecurity, for example. So the voting, the urns where people vote is something that's considered to be very safe. I think that in this 2022 election, you're going to hear, similarly to Donald Trump, you're going to hear that, oh, the election results weren't fair. You might hear that there was voter fraud or tampering, but I don't believe that to be an actual possibility. I don't think that will be the reality. I do believe that the election results can be trusted and should be trusted in Brazil.
So I guess in that case, you have a good constitution, you have a regular election. I mean, you have all these democratic characteristics, and only as you emphasize about social welfare program, people are eager for that program. I guess I don't see that is overall left-wing country, left-wing socialist communist country. I think you are more, your category is fall in the liberal democracy, I guess. And it is,
yes, I would agree with you.
It may be not perfect liberal democracy, but you are fall in that category. But I don't think it is not like similar to China or North Korea, even Russia. No, Brazil is much better, I guess.
Absolutely. I think for me, the difference is that when we talk about China or Russia, I don't think of a socialist democracy. I see more of a communist
Authoritarian.
regime, right? So for me, the word democracy doesn't really have a place where elections aren't fair, right? Where we can't trust in the
They don't
election. So
have.
I think that,
They don't have. China doesn't
no, I
have
know.
people election. North Korea doesn't have. Even Russia is the the elite. They control the democracy. Why Putin has to arrest the opposition leader, and they always block opposition leader, and they not permit freedom of media, and those democracy characteristics are not available in Russia. So Russia is not eligible to be a liberal democracy.
Thank you.
They are
I
more.
agree with you 100%. I actually lived for 2 years in Kazakhstan from 2005 to 2007. And I was there during their elections as well. So this was a long time ago. I'm
How do you
dating
see?
myself.
How do you
You
see
can.
that?
So my time in Kazakhstan, it was very interesting because it was only about 10 years after Kazakhstan was a liberal, or not a liberal nation, was liberated from the USSR, that it
Independent.
had yes, that it had become its own country. So we were living in a country where the South was very Kazakh and the North was very Russian, and there was still a lot of tension between the two populations.
Yes.
And at the time, the president was Nazarbayev. And I mean, he's been the president until recently, actually. I think we could say he might still be the president in some ways, not actually as the elected official, but in terms of his power.
Maybe he is dictator.
Yes. So we were told at that time to stay off the streets. I'm an American citizen, but I live in Brazil.
I see.
And I was told not to be on the streets at that time. It was something that people might think that as an American citizen that we were spying on the election process.
Yes.
And I remember that it was never a question. We already knew who was going to win the election. There had been
right?
one, yes,
Yeah, election
and there
is
had
predictable.
exactly. And there had been one candidate running against him, and she was put in jail. So really there was no candidate. So it was a very interesting time to be there.
It
I
means
still
there is no competitor at all. If he jail opposition, only one leader, right? So he has no competitor. It's dictator style.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's interesting. I still have friends in Russia. I still have friends in Kazakhstan. And, the most current situation, it affects everyone, because when you haven't democratically elected your officials, when you haven't democratically elected your president, and then they're making decisions for the whole world, right? Those people aren't represented, and they're suffering for the decisions that their president is making. It's very sad.
Right. Maybe
I'm a US citizen, but I'm married to a Brazilian. Both of my children were born in Brazil. My children are dual citizens. So my children have American and Brazilian citizenship. Here in Brazil, if I say that I'm American, people are offended because they say, no, we're all American. We're all from the American continent. So as someone from the United States, I do refer to myself as American. But when I'm talking to a Brazilian, I always say that I'm estadunidense. I'm from the United States. I've lived in Brazil for 14 years. I did my master's at a federal university here in Brazil. and I work in international relations for Brazilian universities.
By the way, about ideology again, is there any religion factor connected with the left-wing ideology or right-wing ideology in Brazil?
Brazil is a very Catholic country, very Catholic country. I believe it's actually the largest population of Catholics in the world is in Brazil.
I see.
You can see that in the anti-abortion laws. So while we see Colombia, for example, and other Latin American countries reversing their anti-abortion laws, Brazil remains strong in anti-abortion legislation, which is something that we're seeing happening in the United States again as well. We're seeing a reverse on Roe versus Wade. So it's troubling, very troubling at the moment.
Do you think the Catholic religion is closer to left wing or right wing? Or it doesn't matter?
So I think that the Christian religion as a whole, Christians
Yes.
have the tendency to lean right wing, in my opinion. I think that the Bible can be weaponized, right? I think that as a Catholic country, there is the idea, you know, if we look at the stories of Jesus, for example, it could be used to support democracy.
Yeah. In case of Asia, like Burma, you know, Thailand, here, most Asian country, most Buddhist country are closer to the left-wing ideology, socialism and communism, and it is the case like in Burma. Buddhists are more they are willing to cooperate with left-wing ideology. They don't have much, you know, there is not big deal with liberal democracy. Even many Buddhist religion believer, they claim they support democracy, but they still, you know, attached with left-wing ideology. So that is a mix up the religion and ideology in most of Asia country, including Burma. So it was the case in Burma. You know, now the military coup, even not just religion and, you know, dictator, like military dictator, they all are mixed up with
Yes.
the left-wing ideology. So Burmese military dictator, they against liberal democracy. They don't want to do free and fair election, and they don't want to create a genuine constitution. They always want to control by force, like dictatorship style. That's kind of a system they want to use, they want to keep in the country. So that's why the people against the military regime, they don't want that kind of authoritarian system, left-wing ideology, because China itself even they are using capitalist economy, but their political system is communism, and that is behind authoritarian system, you know. So
yes,
it's all correlated.
Yeah, absolutely. And the situation in Burma right now, it's such a, I mean, I'm sure for you, it feels like much more than a disappointment, but I can remember Barack Obama visiting there not so long ago. And the idea that Burma was, developing and becoming this democratic nation, there was so much hope. There was so much hope not so long ago. And when I see what's happening right now,
people has expectation for that, but
yes,
they did not, they did not done that.
no. And what do you see? What do you see for Burma in the future?
It's very, unfortunate, the regime, the military dictator, it seems they don't want to give up. They don't want to give up their power. They want to continue with by force controlling the country. They want to use, puppet government. They want to say in front of international society, we are conducting election, but it will never going to happen, free and fair election. They want to use puppet leader, puppet government, and the real control is the military. That is their characteristic. They never totally give up their power to the civilian. That's what happened with the previous government, Aung San Suu Kyi government. She could not consolidate that democracy. So
that's right.
Why she is trying to consolidate that democracy in Burma? In the meantime, she tried to consolidate, but eventually the military, earlier they coup before.
Yes.
Suu Kyi could not able to consolidate that. She may have a plan. Suu Kyi has a plan. She tried to consolidate that, but military let her not consolidate that.
Yeah, it's almost like she wasn't fast enough, right? She wasn't fast enough in consolidating the government towards democracy, and the military saw their opportunity and took advantage of it. Yes. Well, I know that our thoughts and prayers are with the Burmese people, right? We want to see the best for them, and we hope to see the situation resolved in a way that they can eventually choose their own leaders.
So now the people are doing revolution nationwide. Every city and every provinces and state, they fight and they, against the military regime everywhere, every place. Now it is anarchy in the whole country. So we can see the people expression, the people desire is clearly say we want democracy. And the problem is they don't have enough energy, They fight the military, they fight back with the, local homemade guns. They don't have professional guns. So that is very difficult for compete or fight back the military who has full arm, professional arm. So that's why we ask international society, why don't you support gun, at least equal position, it will be fair enough to fight back. Now with gun and without gun is fighting, something like that, That is
like to see the United States government providing support to the Burmese people the way that they're providing support to the Ukrainian people right now. But unfortunately, no.
It would be very appreciated that if US government could do such kind of support, but they did not able to support, even they did not pay any financial support. They did not provide any financial support, even not a single gun. Nobody support them and no country support them, Burma. That's why Burmese people cry out, especially Western country and democratic country, why you are silenced? we need your energy. We want you share your energy, your strength to us, then we can fight back the military, the dictator regime. So now we are, people are shouting, so that is current situation. So the future is not good if there is no hope, if there is not available such kind of support from the Western country. It will be very, sadful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to see the support. That's not that I don't want Ukraine to be supported. I'm 100% behind the Ukrainian people, and I'm glad that they're receiving
Me too.
support. But I would love to see the same support going to the Burmese people. And I think the thing is that I see certain activities happening around the world, okay?
Yes.
Like Israel and Palestine, like the Burmese government towards the Burmese people, like the Russian government towards the Ukrainian
Yes,
people.
yes,
And I see that it's the same thing. It's
yes.
people not being given the right to choose
Oppressed.
how they want to worship, who they want their leaders to
Yes.
be.
We can see like this the two group, oppressor and oppressed people. So that is clear.
Exactly.
It's same happen in Burma. So we expect international society at least to provide some kind of support and energy to Burmese revolutionists. And do you know any Brazil government role in the BRICS? How role they play in the BRICS for democracy support around the world?
So you know that for your listeners that BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Right.
To be honest, I think that BRICS was a hope that Brazil and those countries had, that these countries were going to be the new world leaders, that they were going to have the financial success to make them influential around the world. In the case of Brazil, we haven't seen that promised economic development. So that's not to say that Brazil, in the ranking of countries around the world, that they're not doing well, but it hasn't reached the potential that was promised when the idea of BRICS was proposed. Also, from a political standpoint, Brazil doesn't align itself very much with Russia nor with China. We have in the past had strong trade deals with Russia and with China. Obviously, right now, any relationship that we had with Russia is cooled, right? The relationship has cooled since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. We continue to have strong trade ties with China, but from a political standpoint, from, as far as aligning themselves or supporting Asian countries, that's not part of the rhetoric. That's not something that people are talking about.
Even not started.
In Brazil. No.
So it means BRICS is at the moment is a kind of limbo, right? They could not move and they could not back or something like that. They are a kind of limbo, something like
from
that.
A university perspective, from the perspective of higher education, I can speak from my experience that we are definitely working much closer with India at the moment. The ties with Russia are pretty much frozen. I know that from our university's perspective, our chancellor said, listen, if you want to continue research with Russian universities, you can continue. But the professors seem to have decided not to continue research with their Russian counterparts at the moment. So I see that Russia is moving towards China. So the Russian universities and the Chinese universities are working more in conjunction at the moment.
Brazil and India is better cooperation. What about South Africa? Maybe Brazil, India, South Africa, they can be closer than compared to China and Russia, right?
Brazil has one problem when it comes to relationships in higher education specifically, which is that as a Luphonic language, as a Portuguese speaking country, we're a little isolated, right? Because there's Portugal, Mozambique, Angola, but we have very few countries that speak Portuguese, and
linguistic problem.
Exactly. The investment in English as a second language really hasn't occurred here in Brazil. So very few people, I think 1% of the population speak English fluently. So it really limits the relationships that we can have. We have very strong relationships with Mercosul, which is the countries in South America that take part in the same trade organization. Because Portuguese and Spanish are so closely aligned, they're two languages that have a lot in common. Communication is easier. But South Africa, for example, I don't see a strong relationship because of the linguistic divide.
India, South Africa, they speak English and they have official language in English. So Portuguese,
China as well. So
yeah, China also improving, although only Chinese language is official language. And I don't know, Russia also, English is not official language, but China,
no.
Russian, the population, many you know, academician, at least they know English, right? I'm not sure in Brazil. I think Brazil is only Portuguese Portuguese language is only official language.
It's the only official language, yes. And as I said, there's not a lot of English speakers here. China, for example, has the largest population of English speakers in the world, right? Because of the amount of the population that speaks English.
In terms of number,
exactly.
It's not that big, but number, because their population is outnumbered to any other small country if we compare like that.
Exactly. Which I think is funny because Americans, for example, they can't imagine that there's such a large population of English speakers outside of an English speaking country. Unfortunately, that's not the situation in Brazil. In Brazil, particularly in higher education, we're very limited by the amount of professors, researchers who can linguistically do research abroad with other English speakers.
I see. So linguistically, Brazil it is a little bit problem, right, to align with other country. But in terms of politically, in India, South Africa, Brazil are democratic country, you know. China and Russia are not. They are not democratic. So we can say BRIC is actually limbo. It's not functioning. It's only a symbol, right? We cannot use that. BRICS is not useful, not really that much.
It really isn't. Like I said, 10 years ago, the hope was that BRICS would form an alliance that would lend support to one another, that would create countries that were influential globally. we haven't seen that realization. That hasn't happened.
Yeah, people expectation is very high, but the real outcome is not yet come out, right? So
No, and I'm not sure I see that as a possibility anymore. With the situation with Russia, for example, I don't think I can see anytime soon a great alignment between the Brazilian government and the Russian government, for example.
yes, trading also not that success, right? Between
No.
BRICS. Yep.
No,
And
it hasn't. It hasn't been terribly successful. I think China is the only country that we've seen, great success in trade. Not that Brazil doesn't have a strong export-import economy, they do, but nothing compared to China, for example.
right. So I wish Brazil could play a very important role in international politics and geopolitics, because of its size, very big country and one of largest country in South America. And I don't know Brazil in Asia Pacific role. They did not involve in any Asia Pacific regional,
No, they're not strongly aligned, particularly in any Asian Pacific countries at the moment. But I too would like to see Brazil play a more active role in geopolitics. I think Brazil has the tendency to look inward. I don't think that they have a strong history of getting involved in other countries, which as an American, I also appreciate. I appreciate seeing a country that's focused on itself and isn't always trying to get involved with other countries and other countries' politics. But I think we have to find a balance.
Isn't a good relationship between Brazil and United States because they are in same continent and they
Yes.
are two giant country in the continent. How their relationship?
There's a very good relationship between the United States and Brazil. I think that at this moment, I don't think that the Brazilian president is a fan of the American president, but that's momentary, right? That's not something theoretical. I think that Jair Bolsonaro doesn't like Biden, and President Biden is not a fan of Jair Bolsonaro. President Biden has been very critical of the deforestation of the rainforest, which is something that Bolsonaro he has not used his time in office to protect the rainforest. We've seen large deforestation.
Yes.
That the American government has been very critical of. So there isn't a warm feeling between the two presidents, but between the two countries, there absolutely is. I know that a lot of Brazilians live in the United States.
Right.
A lot of Brazilians choose to travel to the United States, so they're an important part of the American economy. Whether Americans know that or not, Brazilians spend a lot of money in the United States. So yeah, I do think that there is in general, there are warm feelings between the two countries.
Especially people to people relationship is very good.
Exactly, that's right.
So do you think that Amazon forest, how it can affect the global in global warming or global ecosystem, or how it can be impact around the world, and how Brazil government is maintaining it?
This is such a delicate subject in Brazil. it really, it causes very strong feelings amongst the Brazilian population, the people, because the Brazilian rainforest, or our part of the Amazon rainforest, is the largest rainforest in existence, and it's responsible for cleaning the air of the rest of the world, right? So
Right.
the role that it plays in climate change, it can't be put into words, the importance of the Amazon rainforest right now. Unfortunately, a lot of Brazilians see it like, wait a minute, you, Europe, North America, Asia, you've destroyed your forests, and now you're telling us what to do with our forest. Do you understand? There's this feeling like, who are you to tell the Brazilian people what we can and can't do with our rainforest? You already destroyed your forests. So I do understand. I understand that feeling that the Brazilians have about, look, this is our forest, let us do what we want. Unfortunately, that's a myopic view. The view is only for the Brazilian people, and it doesn't take into account that they are the hope for the rest of the world. The salvation of the Amazon rainforest is the only hope for global warming. So against global warming.
You know, we do have a rainforest, you know, in Burma, South Asia.
Yes.
But our is not that big as Brazil, Amazon. Of course, Amazon is very big, and you know, why Brazil people, they don't want to, you know, share the global, you know, issue. Amazon is global issue, you know. It's not
The
just
Amazon is a global issue.
for them only, because we have to share. We are living one planet, all better or good. We all are, you know, suffering together. So your forest, my forest, all are, you know, responsible. Why Brazil doesn't want to share or feel, let's do together and to solve together with other, to work together.
Because we're looking at global issues versus local issues, right? The global issue is global warming. The local issue is that farmers want to continue to produce cattle, and they want to continue to export meat. Because I said in the beginning of our interview that Brazil is one of the largest exporters of meat to the world. And our economy depends on cattle. It depends on cows. So that's why there's this push and shove. There's the theoretical idea that we want to save the rainforest. And then there's the local issue on the ground of people wanting to expand the grazing land for their cattle. Of course, for someone who, as I said, I'm originally American, I live in the south of Brazil, I don't live near the Amazon. For me, the only decision is to save the rainforest, right? For myself, from my perspective, we have to save the Amazon. From my perspective, absolutely, it is. It's something for the whole world. But I can understand that the local people to the Amazon might not feel the same way. And I understand that they look at the rest of the world and they say, you did a terrible job managing your forests, managing your natural resources. And now you want to tell the Brazilian people how to manage their. I don't agree. I don't agree, but I'm telling you the way that they feel, that this is like another thing. In Brazil, you can't patent So for example, if you were to go to the Amazon and you were to find a new plant that cures cancer, the Brazilian government won't give you a patent on that plant. So there's no way for the Brazilian people to make money off of the preservation of the Amazon rainforest. But if you are someone from France, let's say, and you come to the Amazon and you find a cure for cancer and you bring it back to France, you can get a patent in France for something that belongs to the Amazon. So there's poor management of the resource, right? There's we haven't found a way to monetize the preservation of the Amazon for the Brazilian people. And until the preservation of the Amazon is monetized, that the Brazilian people see that it can be a benefit to them financially, you're not going to see the support that you'd like to see for the preservation of the rainforest.
I guess there was around the world, international society, they finance for Amazon forest, and they support different way to keep the Amazon once for all. I don't know how local people want, they receive international society support financially or many other things, what they exactly want and what they need, or they want more to satisfy them.
Well, I think the problem is that if you are talking to cattle ranchers and you say, I don't want you to produce any more cattle.
I see.
How can they count on that money in the future? Do you understand? Like, you're saying to them, I'll pay you not to deforest.
Right.
And they're being paid maybe not to work. But how do they know that they can count on that money in the future? I think it creates uncertainty. I think that and I think it's also, I think that they don't like the outside world telling them how to do something. I think that that's a big part of it. I think that it's cultural. I think that there's pushback, resistance to no. Yes. Don't tell me how to handle my land.
I think they are Aboriginal, they are native, they live inside Amazon, right? They want to keep their lifestyle as before because the forest is reducing, the size of forest is reducing. It may be threat for their living in the forest. So I'm not sure it is feasible for them to live as their old style traditional way of living, because the world is keep changing, the forest will be definitely changing. And why they don't want to change their lifestyle, or they just want to keep living in the forest as a Aboriginal lifestyle?
Well, you're talking about two different populations, because there's the native population that can live in peace with the Amazon, that still maintain many of their original habits. There are actually Amazon tribes that have not been contacted, right? So there's completely native Amazon tribes that have not had contact with the white man. Right. But when we talk about cattle ranchers, we're generally talking about, not to say that they might not have native blood, native ancestry, but we're generally talking about Europeans that have come to Brazil in the past 3 or 4 generations. Does that make sense?
I see. Yes.
You're looking at more of the Portuguese, Italians, Germans, who have
settled down in
populated
Brazil.
Brazil.
People who settled down in Brazil, they become a local resident, right?
That's right. Where I live, for example, in the south of Brazil, the population is generally German and Italian.
I see. So they all speak Portuguese?
Yes.
And they
yes.
don't have, they do have dual citizenship from Germany and from Brazil, like that.
Yeah, we still have actually some towns in the south of Brazil where the main language is German, which is very interesting. We have like Oktoberfest and some of those very cultural moments during the year from Germany. But no, in general, everyone speaks Portuguese. Well, actually, everyone speaks Portuguese here. But what I'm saying is that people identify as from their heritage being German or Italian.
Whatever, I think Brazil will not go into left-wing government like China or North Korea.
No, I don't see that happening.
They will be more fall in the category of liberal democracy. Maybe they are not yet perfect, so we have to wait and see for that.